because I thought that would be fitting.
Yeah.
So I live in the state of Oklahoma, and we actually have several locations here in the northwestern part of the state that is a home to many bats. But the state official symbol of flying mammal is the Mexican freetail bat species. And
Yeah.
so I decided that I would go give that one a try. And I think I have the reference uploaded here. I can show you guys what I'm going to be working on.
Yeah, I think you added
Just
it.
towards the bottom. There it is. This guy.
Yeah,
right there.
Beautiful. And so you can see
really
his tail sticking out at the end, which is cool, like that little line just in the very back. And that's where their name comes from, because for a lot of our bats, especially like up north in North America or like the UK or something, their tail is enclosed in like a membrane. So no part of it is like free like that.
Oh, I see. Okay. So is that like an actual like tail, or is it kind of like part of its spine? Or I'm not exactly sure how the anatomy is for bats.
So for bats, just like most other animals with a tail, the tail is kind of like a continuation of its spine.
Gotcha.
Like we have that tailbone that's sort of like a continuation of our spine, and then the vertebrae.
Very nice.
Yeah, I'm looking to see if I can find a picture. Like maybe this one shows how kind of the opposite, where I don't know if you can tell, but you can see how there's all that just like black tissue towards the back left part of the bat, and like the tail is just wrapped up in all of that same sort of stretchy skin, just like the wings are.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I see how that it's kind of like a tail feather, but bats don't have feathers, obviously. It's more of a skin than a feather, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you can think it like helps the bats, like for bats that have it, it can help act like kind of a rudder of a ship or something, or the tail of a plane. It's important for steering. So, and then we have joining us Gerald Benton, who goes by Anthony, correct?
Yes.
Question mark. Okay.
Hey, Pablo.
Hey, Pablo.
Yeah. Thanks for the award, Pablo, the Creative Genius Award. Ooh, we appreciate it. I'm with Creative Geniuses today.
So for mine, yep. So for Inktober, I've been, my reference pictures have been all pretty much black and white clip art kind of stuff. And most of my drawing, or all of the drawings that I've done for Inktober have been just black and white. Just a big pen. I'm low key.
Yeah, I've seen some really cool art done with just a big pen, though. So don't hate the tool.
I mean, I'm not really an artist, but I hear that doing something simply can be more difficult than drawing it with all of the detail, and it can be hard to get something down.
It really is, and I think that's kind of the backbone of Inktober. From the originator's website, actually, part of the challenge is limiting your color palette and your tools to just ink. That's the original heart and soul behind Inktober, is to limiting yourself to only black ink, and controlling your shape, color, light, dark with the hashing and whatnot. Right. Where it's kind of mutated over the years to be like, do what you want, however you want, digital, add some color in, it's all ink, right? So I mean, it's really, the spirit of it is to challenge yourself by limiting your medium, so that you're growing in technique more than relying on all of the spectrum to make it something wonderful, and grow within your technique.
And I've really liked the focus. I really liked the black and white of it. It's really helped me, because I just started drawing with Lindsay and Joseph and Jeremy and all them and Des, and I'm trying to hone some of those skills. So drawing these basic ones, I threw it up on the screen there. I went with the good old classic hanging bat. And I can use this as a reference, get the basic outline, and then do my own shading and stuff, like try things out and try and get a little better at that. that's what I'll be doing tonight.
Cool. Yeah, and it looks like you have I mean, we were commenting before the show a little bit on your picture. It's like, I'm going to put it back up real quick. It's a
Oh, sure, sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It looks like, it's some kind of like flying fox or dog-faced bat, you might also say. Like, these are species that you find in like warmer areas, often like Australia, and they can get pretty big. Like some of them, like I think, some of them can have like a wingspan of like 6 feet or something. It's almost as big as a person. But yeah, they often eat fruit and stuff, and so they have this like bigger face, smaller ears. They look a little bit more like familiar to people.
Hello
like
to Jeremy in the chat. How are you, buddy?
All right, we're going to try this out.
Yeah. Hey, Jeremy. Thanks for stopping by. Yeah, drive safe.
Yes,
okay,
yes.
And then, yeah, those are my only comments on this little dog-faced bat guy. And then...
So, I know there's lots of different types of species. About how many are there that you know of?
So, I mean, that's, the scientists, are always discovering new species and deciding that something that we used to think was one species is actually two species. So I think that the numbers, you often hear like about 700 species of bats thrown around as a number. It's a little bit of an estimate. It's like kind of plus or minus a couple hundred, maybe.
So when they're doing the cataloging and obviously there's like this feature, this feature, this feature, how different does it have to be able to qualify as its own species? Instead of like, oh, you're just a brother or a sister or a cousin. They're not all going to be exactly identical, but how much change has to happen to be able to be classified as a different species?
Well, I mean, if you it's a subjective question, basically, right? Species are a human construct where to some degree, they're always changing and species are slowly splitting apart into different species, or it's just slowly evolving with time. And so, sometimes scientists argue a lot about if they're different species or not. And so, like, you're talking about how different do they have to be? I mean, I think you're thinking of like morphology, like their physical characteristics. Like,
I would think like over time there would be at least some sort of mutation that changes over time. It's like, okay, well, at what point do you decide that that's the cutoff? And we start anew.
Yeah, so sometimes they can look very similar, but they act so differently. I mean, birds are really well known for this. Like, you could have birds that look really similar, but because they have different bird songs, for example, they're not going to mate with each other. They're different species. They behave so differently. Even though we can't really tell them apart, the birds, there's something about it, the birds can tell each other apart. So we have some species that look very similar, but they act so differently. And I can tell if I'm holding them, like, one species is like fighting and like trying to bite me, and it's like, let go of me. And then I pick up the next bat and it's like very calm, or terrified.
It just has like
you know what I mean? But it's not fighting.
Personality.
I'm like, oh, you're like an Indiana bat. You're like and so people use like the best practice is to use like genetic data and morphological data and sort of like these other characteristics of the animal, their behavior, to try to decide if they're the same species or different species. Yeah.
Nice. Very cool.
Then Anthony, I want to get Anthony, what are you drawing if you'd like to share?
Okay. I am drawing a fruit bat. Just kind of hanging out.
Cool. It's taking a little nap. Oh, can you tilt the screen a little bit so the reflection doesn't have the light on there? There we go. There we go.
It looks so cute.
That's a beautiful picture, by the way.
Yeah, going upside down too. Love it.
Should I draw mine upside down? I could just flip it over.
I think
there we go. It's upside down.
if I look at like old papers and stuff, or like old news articles from like the 50s, they'll flip all the bat photos upside down.
That makes perfect sense because of the way they had to set up newspapers. That was probably the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. That's true.
So like walk us through some like I don't know, basic bat facts. Like, what is
Sure.
what is a group of bats called? Is it a herd
That's good.
or a flock?
Oh no.
I think. Wait, is it a colony? I
Yeah,
think it's
so
a
there's
colony if I
definitely
remember
colonies
correctly.
of bats. I froze. I was like, I don't know. Is it a flock? You're right. It's a colony. Especially if they're all hanging together. It's kind of weird actually, because if they're all hanging together, then I think it's definitely a colony. But if they're all like a group of them is like flying, I guess it's still usually a colony. But in my head, I would be tempted to be like, whoa, look at that flock of bats up there.
Well, I mean, I would totally call that too, because I mean, you automatically think flying together. You know, it's a flock. You know, as the bird terminology would dictate, but we're not talking about birds. We're talking about mammals. So it's always a weird, different thing. And I know that their babies aren't chicks. They're
pups.
pups.
Yeah.
And we would think of
yes.
that as being more like a dog or something.
Mammals. I forgot about that.
Yes, they are mammals. And they're not flying rats.
They're not flying rats. Yeah, they're not very closely related to rats, mice, rodents. One of the differences, for example, is that like bats tend to live a long time. I mean, in addition to just being like evolutionarily, like they're both mammals, but within mammals, they're not very closely related to each other. But they also are just really different in their lifestyles. Like bats can live a long time. Some of our species here.
Now, do bats like nest because I mean they hang out in caves and dark places mostly, right?
Yeah, so like I'll show you this picture. Like this is a bunch of them hanging out in a dam, actually, like inside the spillway of a dam. So that all those little dark things are the bats just hanging. So they're not nesting, but they're just like
it's a cluster.
Together. Yeah, they're like in a cluster together. I don't like no bats build nests, but some of them do hang out in like tree hollows in dead trees, for example.
Okay, well that just invokes all sorts of spooky feels.
Someone's got to use those tree hollows.
It reminds me of like the intro to like the Scooby-Doo cartoons where, you know, it's like the flying bats come out. and that's basically like that's and I mean we can touch on like the lore in the spook factor and kind of where that came from, I guess.
Vampires.
Since we are the week of Halloween, you've got to throw in some spooky facts too, and maybe debunk or discuss the origins of where they might have come from. I guess we can go over some.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so as you can, you mentioned vampire bats. Like vampire bats, there's 3 different species of vampire bats. They all eat blood. They sort of exclusively rely on blood for their diet.
Yum.
Some of the species specialize on hunting bird blood, and one of them, I believe, one specializes on getting blood from other mammals. Oh, wow. So these are all in like Latin and South America. And I mean, you mentioned like since 2 people here are drawing, you know, bats that eat fruit, and Lindsay, you're drawing a bat that eats insects. So I think like I want to highlight really quick the great diversity of bat diets. Like there's also species that eat nectar, kind of like a hummingbird or something. So they're going from flower to flower, and you know.
Yes, I read about that today when I was doing the research about how they are very good pollinators, and they help, you know, just like a bee would be to carry and fertilize the floral.
Yeah.
As they get their stuff.
Yeah, and there's also like agave flowers. So agave is where tequila comes from, the agave and nectar, and bats are the only pollinators of the agave, the only pollinators of the agave. So we always try to sell people on that. We're like, oh, without bats, you wouldn't have tequila. So thank bats for that.
Thanks, bats.
Drink a shot for the bats.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, I mean, some species do drink blood, and they will, you know, if you're in the tropics, they will come up to a sleeping person and like bite your toe or something and
Just
lap
a little
up some of
midnight
your
snack.
blood. Yeah, kind of like a big mosquito or something. So I guess not surprisingly, there's some horror stories in that, you know, the myth of vampires is kind of pretty closely based on vampire bats. I mean, there's a lot of similarities. So vampire, you know, like the vampires of lore, they hang out in a colony and they kind of, you know, they have their like few people. They kind of have their like squad or whatever who they hang
Yeah,
out
like
with.
they run kind of in a little small group, like the Lost Boys had their little biker gang kind of thing going on. For
Yeah,
vampires, they didn't turn into bats, obviously, but you know the similar in concept.
yeah. And like the vampire bats are similar in that they're kind of special among bats in that we definitely observe that within their colony they have individuals that they're closely associated with. They have really important like social connections. Like they'll have like some bats will be like more popular than others within the colony. Some bats will be like good
cool.
friends, and they'll actually do food sharing. So because blood is not very nutritious, a vampire bat, if it doesn't get a blood meal, it can starve to death within a few days of not getting anything to eat. And so if the bat doesn't get anything to eat, it will let its other colony members know. It'll let its friends know, basically. And the other bats will throw up blood. They'll like regurgitate blood into the other bat's mouth in the cave to feed it. So they feed other hungry bats like within their friend group and sort of take care of each other. So, you know,
that's kind of disturbing and cool all at the same time.
Yeah, it's, you know, for better or for worse.
So, is there? I don't know if you hit this yet. I was trying to get a little closer, but this will have to do. Are there poisonous bats, or you know, like can they do any real damage, like rabies?
So they can transmit diseases. So yeah, some bats can carry rabies. It's uncommon in bats, and the bats often, most species die from it. It's actually pretty lethal to bats and humans. Some species, like the vampire bat, it seems like they'll have some recovery rate where some of the vampire bats, probably because they're coming into contact with so much blood, they can recover from, they can potentially recover from rabies. They might die. But I don't think that there's any venomous bats where like you would get poisonous. I'm Googling it right now.
I knew that, you know, we I think was I watching you on the broadcast about the bats and COVID and stuff?
Possibly.
About like the transmission or the carrying of not necessarily getting it, but to transport it.
So I knew they could carry, but I didn't know if there was any, like, you know, there's venomous snakes and stuff. I didn't know if there's any like that on.
Yeah, I was just searching just to make sure, because there's so many weird species in the tropics that I don't know. But yeah, I don't see anything about bats that are venomous or that incorporate like poisons into their body. So yeah, there's no species where like, oh, if this species bites you, you're definitely in trouble. There's
you're a goner.
Yeah.
Or you could get superpowers.
Yeah. Oh, I wish. That would be cool.
That would be like the coolest.
Yeah, or the bat gets superpowers. The bat's like, oh, I bit this weird human, and now what? Guess what? Yeah. Trying to think. There's like a lot more. Oh well, I think it's interesting that this vampire bat myth is so common because like I remember a few years ago I was in Colombia and I went to this museum and they were talking about some of the like traditions of some of the indigenous like people of Colombia, and one of the things they were talking about is how these like indigenous cultures would pick like you would have like different, I don't know what term they used, like priests or something, but there would be, like they were showing like decorations of like, oh, this person was supposed to like embody like the jaguar, and this, community or whatever would have sort of like their jaguar person representative, and, also like a bat person. Maybe they were, I guess I would just say priests, but they're, like multiple per community. But what I thought was interesting is so like they would like go into training for a long time, for like years, before they would like fulfill that role. And what I thought was interesting was at least one of the indigenous groups I was reading about, part of the training for being like the bat priest or bat representative was that you had to be vegetarian the whole time, because there's so many, like most of the bat species around there were fruit eating. And so as this like person in training to embody the soul of the bat or whatever, you were supposed to be vegetarian, and they had to live in a cave. So
oh gosh.
that so I thought that was interesting, that like this area of the world that we kind of associate with like, ooh, scary bloodthirsty vampire bats, at least in one indigenous group's like mindset, they were like, bats, oh yeah, those like vegetarian animals that live in the caves. Just eat a bunch of fruit.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I've always been fascinated by bats, so I was happy to jump on this broadcast when you put out the interest in it.
Yeah, I think it's super cool. I'm like loving watching your drawings. I'm actually going to take my screen away for a little bit so we can see what y'all are drawing a little bit better. It's cool to watch the progression. Ooh. Very cool.
It's a little hard to see. I don't know. I gotta fix, I guess, the lighting.
Oh, I mean,
do this.
It'll get there eventually. I feel like I can see it pretty well. Yeah. I mean, I think in general people are just scared of bats because they're out at night, right? And that's kind of
right.
Spooky.
It is kind of spooky. I read earlier today and this may be completely off, but it made sense to me. There's a Celtic lore that ties kind of into, how they always say, oh, well, the bats will like fly and like attack, like get in your hair and that kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
And really apparently they don't typically do that, and they try to stay away from people, and they usually fly higher, like 15 feet or higher.
Yeah.
To when they travel, so it would be extremely unlikely that they would get low enough to get in your hair or anything like that. But like I guess people kind of got that suspicion kind of started because they used to do like these ceremonies where they would dance around the fire, and the fire would kind of attract the bugs that they eat, like the moths and the mosquitoes and whatever, and so like they would fly lower to eat the bugs that were attracted to it, so it would get like I'm sure they would probably run into people while they're dancing around the fire.
Yeah. And
sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's like also I've heard other people say, like I'm sure that's like,
and that's extremely paraphrased too, by the way.
No.
I'm sure I left out a bunch of that, but
No. I mean, I hadn't heard that before. That's really interesting, because I've heard from people, like definitely now the myth that they want your hair or like are going to get tangled in your hair is something that is kind of widespread. And I've heard other people who are worried about that say that like they think that the bat is going to build a nest. Like they think it like wants your hair to make a nest or something, which is weird because like birds make nests and they don't go after your hair. So I don't know why they think the bat wants your hair to make a nest.
That's some aggressive nest making.
And it's like, and they don't build nests, so I don't know what to say about that. And yeah, but that's interesting because like, a lot of our bats here, like some species are really attracted to street lamps at night. And so it's kind of I
would assume it's the same ideology of being attracted to the food.
Yeah, exactly. It's because the street lamps have all these bugs swarming around them. And the bats, some species are like, ooh, buffet. Other species are like, that random bright light in the night is really scary.
Like a moth.
Yeah.
Being that they are a nocturnal species, how is it? Does the artificial lighting at night affect them at all? Like in
Yeah.
how they build their lives or live or whatever. That was such an
Yeah.
intelligent question.
You know how they
Anyways,
live their lives. Yeah.
words.
I mean,
Words.
yeah, it's hard. It gets I think so. Like, so some species, they'll definitely avoid the light if they can. I'd say a lot of bats will avoid the light, but it gets a little bit tricky because, like, once you get an area with a lot of artificial lighting, there's also a lot of other reasons that bats don't want to be around there usually. Like,
Yeah.
for one example, like, often you have a lot of artificial lights and you don't have that many bugs around because it's like suburbia and mowed lawns and stuff.
Yeah, they don't
So,
have the vegetation to attract them to it. The
yeah,
bugs to the vegetation, that is.
yeah, it's just like not good habitat, or there might be, noise pollution. Or I often they don't seem to care that much about noise oftentimes. But yeah, I mean, the short answer is, yeah, some species are like, oh, these lights are awesome because they attract lots of bugs, and others seem more hesitant about the lights for good reason. I mean, owls can also potentially hunt them better when they're around the lights. So even though bats and owls have fairly good night vision.
I'm telling mommy good night.
What's your favorite thing about bats? Is that
Oh
I
my gosh. Um,
what drew you into the bats?
what drew me in was definitely that I remember the first time I went out to help with a bat, like just help some other people who were studying bats. And they put up a net, and within minutes, they just had a bunch of bats and like a bunch of different
What?
species. And I was so struck because, I mean, I wasn't like in the middle of suburbia. This was in this beautiful forested mountain area in North Carolina. But it still really struck me because, I was standing right there and I didn't notice any tons of animals flying around. And then they put up a nut and suddenly all these bats are in it. And I was like, these guys are pretty sneaky. There's like, I consider myself like, I spend a lot of time outside in nature, hiking around. I'm one of those people who's very observant. I'm like, ooh, look at this mushroom. What is this weird bug doing here? And so I'm like pretty observant, but I just had no clue because our night vision is not as good as we think. We really can't see very far. And the bats aren't making noises that we can hear either. And so they're just kind of invisible to us. And I was just so fascinated by this whole, it was like discovering Narnia or something. I don't know, like this whole world I didn't know about before.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And how long have you been in the bat field?
I would say since like 2010, 2011, in that range. So I guess it's been, I'm coming up on my 10-year anniversary here.
Wow, that's cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thanks. Yeah.
That's batty.
I'm loving how these drawings are shaping up.
Thank you.
Have you been I'm like, so like you're all interested in the bats and I'm like all interested in the drawing. Have you been following like particular Inktober like prompts, or just doing kind of whatever?
Yeah, pretty much. I've had it, like I was saying earlier, I had to take a little bit of a break because I've been so busy with kid activities. It's football season, y'all. But that's wrapping up soon, so I'm kind of excited to really hone back in on my art again. But yeah, for the most part, it's been really just inspired by Inktober prompts and getting those done every day. And I love drawing, but I also love how the challenges bring the community together, and so it feels like you guys are all working together on the same project, even though it's each individual piece is their own. You know, so it's kind of nice to come together and work on something as a collective.
Yeah, and in a way, you're all working on the project of like bettering yourselves and your artistic abilities or whatever.
Absolutely.
So that's cool. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I did a couple last Inktober. I decided I was gonna do some I was going to try to draw skulls. And I think I drew like 2 skulls. I was going to try to draw skulls
Skulls
of
are
like different
challenging.
animal species.
Yeah.
They are. I get in trouble with like letting myself get really detail oriented about stuff. Yeah, I'm not very good at what we were talking about at the very beginning, like forcing yourself to simplify in your
Yeah, and one of the
presentation.
things that's actually a good point, because when I did August, that was my first monthly challenge. I hopped on with all those guys on Lindsay's channel and Joseph and them, and I was doing like a full size sheet per day, and they were
Hi,
the ones
Beta.
that told me, "Hey, Beta," they were the ones that told me, simplify it. You don't have to do a full sheet
Oh yeah.
every day.
If
You
you're
can,
doing a month-long challenge, you don't need to be doing like full like poster size pieces or even like full printer size pieces because you will burn out very quickly, especially if you are tend to be a detail oriented person or
Yeah.
even a perfectionist. You will lose your mind by the end of the week if you do something super large. So Joe and I have discovered that the strategy, and Jeremy has also agreed upon this practice, is if you're going to embark on a month-long challenge, make your size a little smaller than you would normally do so that they go a little bit quicker each day so that you have, you can pace yourself. It's like training for a marathon. Like a runner would train for a marathon.
Yeah.
You run a little bit every day to get your stamina built up so that you can have enough energy at the end to make it to the finish line without dying, right? So it's kind of the same concept. It's just a little bit different. It's more all in your brain. You're conserving your creative energy, I would like to say. Because I definitely feel it, especially around between day 15 and 17. I hit that wall, like the runner's wall. You have to push
Yeah.
yourself through and like drag your butt up to the table and grab your pencil and just do something. I can go back and look at all of the challenges I've ever done, and usually that middle week is the crappiest week of the entire month because I'm just getting something done.
Yeah.
That's what I always hear. That's what I hear is like the middle. It's very perceptive of you because I read that in a book recently where they were like the murky middle. That's where the
Yes.
fight is. It's not at the end;
Exactly.
it's in the middle. And I
The
was
middle.
like, yeah, it's so true. Oh, thank you for showing us up close. I
Yeah.
love it.
I'm trying out new cams. So this is actually the
Oh,
first.
look at you!
This is actually the first broadcast that I've been able to show me drawing it without. I got a new webcam, so
He got it
my
out of the
phone doesn't
box.
melt. Yep, and so
That's so cool.
we're trialing. I can see from here that the lighting isn't the best until I get the ink going. Now you can see it a little better, but when I was
Yeah,
penciling, it
the
wasn't.
sketch is always a struggle with webcams because they don't do the justice of what you're seeing on paper until once you start getting the dark inks. That's kind of why I wanted to start getting that preliminary sketch done before we even went live. I was doing the framework because I'm like, this is so boring to watch somebody scribble on a blank paper for 15 minutes. So I really try, if I'm doing especially a show like this where we're kind of at the mercy of the clock more than anything. I try to have at least some kind of an idea of a sketch ready to go before we start.
Yeah.
So that I can get in and start getting the color. And so it's more entertaining to watch marker go on paper than pencil to go on paper anytime.
Not a bad idea.
I almost didn't have anything to start off with the way my afternoon went, but we got her going, so it's all good.
Nice. Well, yeah, you were talking before about like all the different bats that that you were looking at, all the different types of faces when you were trying to pick something.
Oh, there's so many different faces.
Here, I'll share real quick.
That's just a few.
That's smattering.
Just a few of them.
Yeah, and so a lot of their face shape is like determined by. Well, I'm gonna take off some of you guys real quick just so we can see the bat faces better.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm like peeking here awkwardly now. Gosh, maybe I'll even take off myself. There we go. Yeah, so like a lot of their face shape is determined by what they eat and also a little bit
okay.
how they hunt. So like the species that have sort of like a longer, like a muzzle, like maybe the bottom, what kind of all the whole bottom row of those bats, they probably eat fruit or nectar. And so, you know, they probably like flying around and then maybe they're like landing on the whole fruit and grabbing it and just like starting to eat it or something.
Oh, wow.
And the species that have, you can tell that their ears are kind of smaller too. At least the two on the right have like smaller ears.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they're not using echolocation. Like they say, fruit does not put up much of a chase, right?
Oh,
The fruit is
that's
just sitting
right.
there. Yeah,
Well,
so
and
they
you
have,
can just kind of
Yeah.
follow your nose to the sweet stuff, right?
Follow
yeah, your nose and your
Just follow your
eyes. So like
nose.
look at their big eyes. Like the one, especially like the one in the one lower corner, it has its eyes
Yeah.
completely open. You can see its eyes are so much bigger. They actually they have much better night vision than us, these fruit eating bats. And so they're out there finding fruit to eat. And some of the ones that have like the bigger ears, or like the ears have all kinds of ridges and special shapes in them, they're
Yeah.
echolocating, so they're using like sonar to hunt insects. Often like these insects are bugs that are flying around and the bats like catch them in air. And so they need a lot of highly detailed, like fine scale information about where the bug is because it's moving around so quickly so that they can find it. And so they have like, when they are using their sonar, their echolocation, they send out the sound waves through their mouth, and then
Yeah.
the idea is the sound waves bounce back and they like catch them in their ears and sometimes their nose. So Lindsay, you mentioned how some of the bats have these like kind of like flat.
Yeah.
like,
And I actually
nose.
have another collage over here of really super funky ones. They look almost like rhinoceroses or unicorns. Their little nose shapes are
Let me
so
find this one.
odd. Here, I don't think, is there room for it? There's not room for it.
Oh, I see. It's not like uploaded here. We'll just put that one up again. Yeah, they like some of them use their nose to help catch the information on like the bounce back of their sonar waves, basically. So that was it. I'll put people back up again.
Cool. Yeah, it was really fascinating to see those pictures and see all the different types. I was unaware of how many different varieties of body build, shape, size, the whole thing. It's just amazing how many different kinds there are.
Yeah, I think it's so cool. Vada says, "Wow, that's way better than Shark Week, Batweek." She's talking about, yeah, it is.
There's totally is Batweek this week, like
It
officially.
is this week, yeah. So they make it.
So
They make
cool.
yeah. It's usually the week of Halloween. Which,
Halloween.
There's some people don't like to. Some people don't like to associate bats with Halloween because they're like, oh, they're already so like looked down upon or whatever. We don't want people to think they're scary, but it's like, oh, come on, they're already associated
just have
with
some
it.
fun with it.
Yeah. That's
just be batty.
Just
yeah.
get batty with it. Yes.
So
I was
Yeah.
over chilling with Veda earlier in her broadcast before this, so
Nice.
I said we're drawing bats tonight, and she's like, I love bats.
yeah,
Bats are awesome.
Bats right.
they are.
Bats right.
Oh, bat rights.
Let's share that one too because she's exactly right. They are awesome.
Yeah, some bats are adorable. Some bats are things of nightmares, or at least they look like it anyways. And some of them are like, what is that thing?
What's happening?
Who thought that was a good idea? But, I bet you they probably have the best dinners, so I'm not going to judge them too hard.
Maybe, let's share, let's see, like this guy's pretty cute. So this bat was at a rehab facility. So he got found in, I think, like someone's house or something in the winter. So this is a species called the big brown bat, which I call them the pigeons of the bat world because they just, nice drawing progress. Yeah. But yeah, this species is like, it does very well with people. So it will live inside people's attics. And like in between their walls if they have like holes in their house. And so this bat was probably, it was like hibernating in someone's house over winter, and maybe woke up from hibernation for a few hours and was flying around, and someone was like, what is this bat doing in my house? I can't put it outside in the snow. I don't want it to continue living in my house. And so he lived at a rehab center for the winter and got a photo shoot, as you can see here, and then got released in the spring.
Oh, that was one of the things I was going to ask you about. If they do hibernate, like do they have they take the winter off, or how does their hibernation work if they do?
Yeah,
do all species or just some species?
Just some species. I mean, so obviously questions like hibernation, that's for species that live at really high latitudes where we actually get an extreme winter, like a freezing winter.
Yeah.
But all of our bats in areas with winter have to hibernate. Some of them migrate like birds. Some of them fly farther south. But there's no food for them in winter because all of our high latitude species eat insects, and there's just not enough insects out and about in winter for them to have anything to eat. Yeah, so they'll hibernate in caves or in people's houses sometimes, like I just said. Some of the species that migrate they'll migrate like a little bit, but to an area where it's still snowy but still kind of warm, and they'll hibernate like under the leaves of the forest, like in the leaf litter, in the fallen leaves, or like in logs or dead trees. So I have a picture of a species that migrates called the eastern red bat, and I think these bats are really beautiful.
Is that the extra furry one? Like has a super furry red body?
Yeah, it's one of the species that has it has extra fur on its tail membrane. So like its wings, its black wings are just skin, and then the red parts are furry.
Oh my
but
gosh.
a lot of bats, their tail, they have like a tail membrane that's also just skin. But this bat has like fur on its tail so that it can kind of wrap itself up in its tail like a blanket when it's cold.
Aww.
Which is cute. Yeah, so cute. And then this is another bat that migrates named the Hoary Bat, like hoarfrost, not.
Oh my goodness, the Brilliant Award, Lucia.
Wow.
Oh, thank you so much, Lucia. It's so appreciated. Oh, and we have all kinds of awards coming in. We have another award from Lucia, the Inktober Award. Yay. Oh, we love it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Lucia, I think you mentioned once that you see a lot of like bats flying around outside your house sometimes or something. Is that correct? Let me know. Oh, and then we have a Haps Hug Award from Ella.
LMK.
Oh.
LMK.
LMK.
Yeah, Lucia says yes, she does see a lot of bats flying around outside her house. Where are they at again? The Dominican Republic? Yeah, lots of bats down there.
That was something interesting I found. Even here in downtown Frederick, Maryland, we'll see bats flying around every so often, and it's a pretty urban setting. And I always thought they were, more out in the wild, not so urban.
Yeah, I bet it's that big brown bat I was showing. They really are kind of like pigeons. Like they don't care. They're very adaptable. Some people don't like them because they're like, ugh, another big brown bat. Like, what do I want with this thing? They're everywhere. But I'm like, man, these bats are like, there's something kind of special about the ability to just get used to new situations like that. I'll throw him up again. And like, actually, and I'll put up a picture that I have to say, I'm going to put up this picture. And it's of me holding the bat, but you should never hold a bat with your bare hands or at all, really, without gloves. I'm doing it because this bat had been being taken care of for a couple months. So he was
Is that like a scent transfer thing or?
No, he just, this is what I'm getting at is he just learned, within like a day or so, he was like, I hate people and I'm going to bite you. And then he was like, oh, you give me food. I'm not going to bite you anymore.
He's like, nah, you're cool.
Yeah. And in addition to that, I have my rabies vaccine, so that
helpful.
helps. That helps too, yeah. But yeah, in general, you don't want to hold bats because they could bite you and give you rabies. And then once you start showing symptoms of rabies, it is too late for
Dun, dun,
you.
dun.
So dun dun dun. They have
really?
developed, yeah. So like that's why they say like if you get bit by a bat or something, you need to go get a rabies shot as soon as possible because the vaccine will work as long as you get it before you start showing symptoms.
Right.
And they have developed some ways. There are now like a handful of people who have survived, like actually gone through the course of the disease and survived, but they have to like medically induce a coma.
Oh my gosh.
While the disease runs its course,
Wow.
and then you have like you have some like brain damage afterwards. I've actually spoken to the woman who is the first person who survived rabies, at least the first person that like we know of,
Gosh, that's
according
terrifying.
to medicine, who survived. And she got bit as a kid when I think it was like outside of church or something, she saw a bat and like bent down to pick it up or help it. And I've met her because she comes to, like, she was at a bat festival promoting like bat conservation. So she's like a big fan of bats now, despite everything she went through. And speaks out for the fact that they need more protection and we should be appreciating them and stuff like that.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, it definitely left its mark on her, so
I imagine so, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
terrifying to go through that whole thing. Oh my goodness.
yeah. Yeah,
So
definitely.
are
If you have bat questions, put them in the chat, and I will also read them. Do most biologists get rabies shots? Most bat biologists, certainly yes. And I even know some older bat biologists who have developed an allergic reaction to the rabies vaccine now because
Oh gosh, because they've had it so many times.
Yeah, they used to suggest that you get it, like, I think, every year, every 3 years, like, no matter what, if you were, just at risk, like a bat biologist is. And now they have the recommendations have changed. They're a little bit more judicious. So, like, if I were to get bit and I'm like, oh, that bat definitely bit me, then I'm supposed to get a booster shot, for example.
I see.
It's most common to get rabies. Most people that get rabies or get exposed to rabies, I should say, got bit by a dog. So definitely a lot of biologists that work in areas where there's like feral or, sort of semi-feral dogs running around, they often get rabies shots. So I think all mammals can get rabies. So a lot of biologists who work with mammals, bats, cats, bears. I guess, I don't know. I mean, bears getting rabies, actually. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. Raccoons, definitely.
I had to.
I absolutely loved the Office reference. Yes, let's do that. That's great.
Face of rabies. I'm gonna have to look that up. I don't know.
Do you have any kind of like Instagram for this kind of stuff, or
you have a Batgram?
A Batgram?
I don't. I haven't. My Instagram is almost entirely devoted to my rock climbing interests. I think like if I share a lot of bat and wildlife stuff on Twitter. So Twitter is the place to find me if you're interested in like biology, wildlife, science stuff. Yeah. And on
Awesome,
yeah.
Because I was also, if you had the Instagram, I would take a picture of this and send it to you. That way you can have it.
Oh yeah, you totally still should. I would love that. I am on Instagram. Definitely. I think that's so cool. I'm like so excited to see your artwork too, because I mean art is really important way to just convey, like, I don't know, just like show people what animals look like. Oh, that's
Yeah.
so cool. Or inspire people. Oh my
Well, I
God.
definitely learned a lot about bats that I didn't know about just researching the little bit I did this afternoon. So I know that just having events like this kind of brings awareness to the
Yeah.
different species, the history, just the basic facts, but also a little bit of the lore behind them, and all that stuff is really cool.
Oh yeah. No.
And
And like, yeah, we like we're talking about vampire bats earlier, and yeah, we talked about like them living in colonies and stuff. But another thing I forgot is that they can kind of like lure their prey into a sense of security, from what I understand. So like,
oh,
and like that's like a thing, like vampires kind of do that, right? Like they're charming and you can like stare at them. I forget
that
what it
kind
is.
of reminds me a little bit of like the movie Hocus Pocus. Come, little
Yeah.
children, I take thee away. Anyway, so yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, so like there's so I heard of this in at least one species of vampire bat, which is like basically it's a species of vampire bat that specializes in eating birds.
Oh
And
wow.
instead of wild birds, of course, many of them eat chickens now, you know, easy pickings. And the chickens, when they have like baby chicks, they'll like sort of roost on, like sit on them at night, you know what I mean, to keep them warm
Mm-hmm.
and safe. So they like have an area of their belly that has fewer feathers, that is like their brood pouch, and that's where they kind of like sit on their babies. But like the vampire bats want to be sat, they want, they not only do they want the chicken's blood, they want to be in that warm little like brood pouch area.
What? That's a
So
little
what?
weird.
Yeah, well, I mean, because it's warm. I don't know. It's like warm and cozy and
I guess that
safe,
makes sense. I want to
protected.
snuggle.
Yeah, protected from predators. So they will actually somehow like sneak or like coddle their way into the little brood pouch, and the chicken's like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
and
that's
then
cool.
it starts feeding on the chicken from a
Oh
very
my
cozy
god.
position. So yeah, that's kind of creepy, spooky, batty.
Batty.
Um,
So batty.
so batty.
I was reading about the pups, and they don't, when they reproduce, it doesn't take long. They can like pop out a bird, not a bird, a bat every like what, month or so.
Oh, so that
How many
actually,
weeks is the? It's not a very long gestation, and what I, other than it being extremely short and in time of development, but also once they're born, I read that it's kind of like they leave all of the babies in their little nesting spot. They don't really nest, but their spot that they hang out at, and then
Their
like,
den.
yeah, their little den. But as if there's like multiple mothers coming to like check on their young, it doesn't really matter which mother it is. They'll like pass the teat sort of concept.
interesting.
Pass
So
the teat.
yeah, I'd actually
So
heard.
it's not like, mom only feeds that baby, but if another baby is hungry, mom that and it's another mom that comes to check on the young, they'll just be like, here you go, no big deal. Kind of like a community feeding sort of thing. And I was like, that is interesting. I've never heard of anything like that before.
I know that, like, so for at least the species we have around here, some of those things are the same and some aren't. So, like, our bats, like in northern North America at least, they only reproduce once per year. And
Okay.
they do have a very short gestation. And it's because, in part, it's because they have delayed fertilization. So the bats will have sex like in the fall, and then the female will store the sperm in her over the whole winter. And then, like,
Dang.
once she wakes up from hibernation in the spring, there's like fertilization and gestation occurs. And they'll only have like one or two babies a year.
Wow.
I think just because things are more limited here. You know, it's cold part of the year, and you can't be popping out babies all the time.
I'm not sure if those bats really do like reproduce all year round, but I thought that the whole the community thing with the feeding was very interesting. I was like, I don't know if that's just
so yeah, they will like
a
form
general thing.
we call them maternity colonies. And a lot of the
that's great.
purpose is so that the babies can all stay warm together when the moms are like flying around at night looking for food.
Yeah.
So they like oftentimes they'll leave like all the babies together, and they can recognize their own baby by like their call and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they do often like preferentially sort of like their goal is like they're coming back and forth and like feeding their baby, but they will adopt orphans. I've heard of that happening. So it makes sense that if like another bat is like particularly hungry sounding, they're like, oh my gosh, okay.
You'd be like, oh, all right, fine, I'll take care of you too.
Yeah, you're hungry. You're hungry.
Wow.
And so since they are mammals, they're nursing, at least initially they're nursing. And sort of anecdotally, I heard, actually I think there might be a study on this, that like, you know, the babies, it takes them some time to learn how to fly. And like
I was just about to ask how long it takes for them to develop where they can go out on their own, leave the nest.
Yeah, I mean, it varies a lot by species, but I think it's often, you know, like a month or something, or a couple weeks. But also, I was gonna say, once they do start flying, they've documented that like they're not very good when they first start flying, right? And yet they're trying to like learn how to fly and learn how to catch insects. So often when the babies start flying finally for the summer, the moms will sort of leave the areas that are easier to fly in. So if there's like a forest and a big open field, maybe before the babies start flying, the moms are all like flying around the middle of the field each night hunting. But once the babies start learning how to fly, the moms will kind of like move to the outside of the field, like along the tree line where it's a little bit harder to fly, and like in the center it's more like the babies flying around.
I got
supposedly. Yeah, so they're like, oh, you're learning, you got your training wheels on.
Congratulations, you passed.
Oh my gosh. All the shading that's coming in now is so cool to see.
Yes.
It's coming along.
Very nice, very nice.
Gerald, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great.
Or Anthony?
Either one's good. Enjoying all the talk about bats.
Good, I'm glad to hear it.
Yes, thank you for having us for this one.
Yeah, this is so cool.
I'm loving watching your bat drawings. I'm totally into it.
Yeah, that's it.
I wonder if I can. Oh, sorry. What were you gonna say?
You know, I was just gonna ask. Aside from owls, do bats have any other predators like snakes or?
So snakes will eat them. I don't know of any snakes like in like North America, Europe that eat bats, but definitely in like South America, there's snakes that will eat bats. I know in Puerto Rico, there's these snakes that specialize in eating bats, and the snakes are actually endangered. So I felt a little bit bad. I saw these snakes in the wild because I was there studying bats, and what the snakes do is like there's like the cave entrance, and then the snakes like hang outside the cave, so that their goal is to just sort of be like these hanging like death traps to like get the bats as they fly past.
Snatch them as they fly out.
Yeah. And so I felt a little bit bad because I was like, oh, I should be rooting for the bats, but like I know these snakes are like endangered, and so I guess that I kind of hope
they have to eat too.
Bats. Yeah, exactly. So there's snakes that eat bats. Trying to think. Like there's some species of hawks or raptors that well, I guess raptors. Owls are technically raptors, but anyways, there's some species of hawks that will eat bats, and they don't hunt all night, but they kind of specialize on that in that period, like dusk, right when the bats are first starting to come out. And that's kind of like an interesting time because the bugs are like most active right at dusk. And so the bats really want to get out like right at dusk, a lot of them, but that's also when predators like hawks can still see. And so it's also extra dangerous during that time. So it's a little bit of like a risque guessing game they have to play. Also like with any animal, almost with any small animal, domestic house cats, dogs, a lot of I've talked to the people, like the state health department here in Michigan, a lot of the bats that get submitted to be tested for rabies are bats that people's dog got, actually.
Oh gosh.
So people will find like their dog with a bat, and then they're like, oh no, does my dog need a rabies booster shot or whatever? So they'll take the dead bat and submit it to the state, and then the state like does a rabies test on the bat to let the owner know they should be worried about their pet, basically.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So it kind of ties in a little bit. What is a bat's biggest fear? Like if you were a bat, what would you be worried about out there?
Humans.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess like probably owls. Those owls are smart.
They're terrifying.
Yeah, they have a lot of senses.
It's not lying.
Yeah, they're like quiet and can hear really well and can fly really silently. So I would probably be worried about that. I guess I would also be worried about things like, oh, am I going to find a good place to spend the winter, like to hibernate in, and like, how am I going to get there? Because even the ones that hibernate in caves, like, they don't necessarily hang out around the cave in the summer, because then there would be like so many other bats around right there eating that it would be hard to find enough food. So
what do they do for food storage during the winter, or how does that work?
They just put on body fat and they lower their metabolism a lot. When you're in a state of hibernation, you're kind of like in cryogenesis or something. So they put on a bunch of fat and then
Me too.
Chill out, literally.
I'm always hibernating.
Hi, James. Born, Gentleman Ghost, nice to see you.
Hey.
He asked us Gerald and Tim drawing the flying fox bat, the one of nightmares. I don't know about the one of nightmares, but they are flying foxes. Yes, yeah.
Hello, Mr. Burke from the Smokies.
Mr. Burke.
Hey, Joseph.
Enjoying his
Joseph
travels.
Burke Arts in the Smoky Mountains.
Take myself away. Yeah, I just think this stuff is like shaping up really nicely. That bat is looking really beautiful.
It really is. I like
that drawing. It reminds me a little bit of, I'm not sure exactly what species you have there, Gerald, but it reminds me of the Egyptian fruit bat from like the children's book Stella Luna.
Oh my gosh, I love that book.
Yeah.
So sweet.
It's gorgeous. I like it too because that bat just looks so content. Yeah, Gentleman Ghost, do you still think this is the stuff of nightmares? Oh, it's adorable.
Yeah. Salutations, exalted beings of the multiverse. Love that. That's great.
Oh wow, Lindsay, you're really getting like the details in the ears of that bat.
Yeah, I've really like how this wing is turning out, and then I'm getting into the face bits right now, and it's really shaping up nicely. I'm liking how it's going.
Oh yeah.
The size is a frightening part.
Yeah, at least so there's a bunch of different flying fox species of bats, and the biggest species of bat in the world is one of these flying foxes.
Yeah. What's the wingspan on that? Do you know?
I think it can get up to 6 feet.
Wow. That's huge.
But
Oh no, it's the golden crowned flying fox is the biggest one. Oh wait, yeah, that's it. A wingspan up to 5 feet 6 inches. Okay, but only weighing 2.5 pounds, up to 2.5 pounds. So
Well,
a
that's
lot
not.
of it is just their wings. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
the stretched out wing
Yeah.
membrane skin thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
A lot
their
of show
nest.
no go.
I'm not the scientist here. I just play one on TV.
I like it. Scientists aren't very good at being charismatic, so at least in general.
In the summer, I had
Science
to kick a
wingy
group of
thingies,
freetails
you know.
from my roof. I built them a nursery with plans of a net.
Whoa, that's interesting. That's cool. Yeah, they do. The free-tailed bats will form pretty big colonies. So that's the one that Lindsay's
Yes.
drawing a free-tailed bat. And like, if you've ever heard of the big bat colony in Austin, Texas, that lives under a bridge, those are free-tailed bats.
They have the Alabaster Caverns is a hot tourist spot in northwestern, and they have northwest Oklahoma, and they have a huge colony up there.
Yeah. Yeah, the free-tailed bats, I'm not that as familiar with them because they are a little bit farther south than I typically do research in, but they're another species that has come to do well with humans. And we do kind of encourage people like, oh, if you have bats in your attic or whatever, to try to put up bat boxes, like alternative housing for
I
them.
did see several mentions of a bat box, and I'm like, I don't know if, I mean, they're cool at a distance. I don't think I would want to have a bat colony hang out in my backyard.
Yeah. Some people like it because they're like, oh, they're going to provide like pest management and help beat the bugs around, and some people just like them and think they're cool and want them around. But you do have to be careful, like if you have bats living around your house, or especially if they're living inside your house, like in your attic. Sometimes people will be like, oh, I don't want the bats in my house, which is, that part's reasonable. But then what they'll do is they'll wait until the bats fly out at night and then like cover up whatever the hole is. Like,
oh, that's not good.
Yeah, and what's not good is depending on the time of year, they might have their babies that they left behind inside. Like they were going to come back and forth and be feeding their babies throughout the night. And so now you're going to have like dead bats in your house. You've
killed.
No.
Don't kill the bat babies.
Yeah.
I'm just saw a video.
Hi, Tim.
Hi.
Other Tim. Not Tim in the chat. Not
Sorry,
our Tim.
No, there's
You're Tim.
There's so many interesting comments that I'm getting like distracted now. So Joseph Burke says that he got to see the Appalachian pygmy shrew on Tuesday in a cavern. That's cool. I've
he's
never
been
heard
hanging
of
out
that.
in nature this week, up in the Smokies, and he's been seeing lots of different beautiful nature sightings. So I'm sure that was quite an experience.
I'm so jealous. Yeah, that's cool. I haven't seen a cool mammal in a cave besides a bat, I don't think. I've seen cool salamanders in there, and maybe some cool fish too, but never a shrew. That's cool. TJ Gwynn, I'm not sure what this comment means. I just saw a video of someone in the hydrophobic stage, 100% fatal. I don't know what that means.
In the what?
The hydrophobic stage. So, like, is it referring to? It's not referring to drawing because it's talking about it being fatal. Yeah. Can you expound upon that more? I'm curious. And then Paul Daly. Ooh, this I don't know. I'm bad with memorizing like facts and numbers. But I could double check this. The Mexican free-tailed bat was recently clocked at 99.5 miles per hour.
That's pretty fast.
It's pretty fast. Maybe reason for people to be scared of bats after all.
Hydrophobic effect.
They definitely, so like I know that I've heard of like military people's like having interest in bats over the years, and especially with drones now and understanding
Oh, with the
sonar
echo
and
stuff.
flight technology. There's some research that's like looking into how bats navigate, especially I think like these free-tailed bats, they have really big colonies, and then they're all like potentially bumping. How do they avoid like crashing into each other when they are exiting the cave and stuff? How do they navigate? Well, it turns out I think that they kind of bump into each other a lot, but they're just like able to recover. You know what I mean? Because they're like bendy and bouncing, and they're
Yes.
like, oh, whatever, excuse me.
They're
sir.
naturally flexible.
Yeah. So I guess if you want to have a bunch of like drones flying close to each other or whatever, you have to figure out how to make them just okay with crashing into each other a little bit. But yeah, there was also like in World War II, the military had another thing where they, because many bats do like to live in houses, the military had a thing where they literally like let a bunch of bats go from a plane with fire bombs attached to them or like some sort of like flaming thing. And the idea was that they would go to all these like wooden, that they were like, oh, and then the bats will fly into the wooden houses and stuff in Japan and like set them all on fire, and it will be like targeted. I think that they actually, that was a program that was in development. I don't know if they actually, I forget if they ended up releasing them.
Release the bats.
I'm Googling it now. Yeah, bat bombs were an experimental World War II weapon developed by the United States. I don't think they were actually deployed.
So TJ was talking about rabies, looks like, and the symptoms. From what I understand, it's not.
Yeah. Okay.
That makes more sense.
It's not 100% fatal. If you got the vaccine and you catch it early, right?
Yeah.
You were saying if you got to get in there quick, but it's not 100% fatal.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be like super quick. I don't know. It's not like you start developing symptoms like the next day. I think it's like usually takes like, oh, I don't remember, but I think it's like more than a week. It's like a couple weeks or something. But yeah, what I see he's talking about, gosh, so many comments. I have to scroll up. Yeah, the hydrophobic stage is one of the symptoms of when you start to develop rabies is that you start to be hydrophobic, which is really weird. So you don't want to like drink water, and then you're also really thirsty, obviously. It sounds terrible. And there's like, from what I understand, I don't know if it's different strains of rabies or if just different people respond different ways, but some people and animals get like bitey, which makes sense. And then some just kind of go like
agitated,
where they're just like very, I don't know, not responsive. And so I don't know if the hydrophobic is only associated with like one of the two or both, but yeah, I didn't realize there was a video. Yeah. We talked a little bit earlier about how with modern medicine, we can often get someone to survive now by medically inducing a coma, but it's very difficult once someone has started developing symptoms to survive, especially like to survive without long-lasting repercussions. I mean, it's a virus that travels to your brain, and so then you have effects on your brain.
Yeah.
A happy comment from Tim Witham, who is one of my sponsors. Thank you so much, Tim.
Yay, Tim.
He says, such cool art. I love this. Yeah, I'm glad you like it. And thanks for joining. Glad you could stop by. Tim is down in Texas, so plenty of free-tailed bats down there, like the one that was drawing. Yeah. Paul Daly says, when I'm out in the park system on my horse, I've seen several bat houses. That's cool. That's awesome. Yeah, bat houses, we talked about them a little bit. They're kind of like bird houses or bird boxes that you put up. And the idea is that a lot of bats like to live in dead tree hollows, and the bat box is kind of emulating a dead tree cavity or hollow in which the bats can live. Given that people don't like trees falling, often dead trees get cut down in parks and in residential areas. And so the bat boxes are a really good way to like replace that aspect of the habitat that we're changing. it's also a good idea to have a lot of bat boxes near each other, like what you're describing in the park, actually, because the bats, like we talked how the moms will form like a maternity colony in the summer to raise their babies. They'll actually move around from day to day. So, and some of it's based on the weather conditions, like, so they like to have several options like nearby, and then they can kind of choose the one that like based on the day is best. Like they're like, oh, it's really hot, it's going to be really hot, so like we actually want to go to this site where it's a little bit cooler for tomorrow. And like, oh, like now it's like too cold and we want to go to this bat box that gets a ton of sunlight. So that's one reason they like to have a lot of different options within a close area.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense, right? And another reason is it probably helps them avoid predators, like some raccoon just coming in there in the middle of the day and being like, oh, this is where I come to eat my bats every day.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense to move them around.
Wow. Stream of the
Stay
Week
on
award.
move.
Thank you, Joseph.
Yeah,
Whoa,
thank you.
nice.
Whoa, it's amazing. I appreciate it so much. Awesome.
Definitely cool.
Scrolling up. Yeah, Joseph says, I have a bat family that lives near a bell tower near my house. The good news, we have very few bugs around our home.
Yay.
Yeah, I see that so many people tell me that. They're like,
And
oh,
I mean, that's a big deal because Joe lives in Orlando. It's very humid and apt to have very large, well-fed bugs. So
humid.
to have that under control, I would think, is a very important thing.
yeah.
So humid.
Oof. Yeah, and I hear people too that are like, oh, we used to have a lot of bats in our bat box and now we don't anymore. And now the bugs are worse. And I always wonder, it's like, well, I never know. It's like maybe the bats scare the bugs away, or maybe the bats left because the bugs left. You know what I mean? But it's also,
I bet it's probably a little bit of both, I would think,
Yeah.
from year to year. Because I mean, sometimes mosquitoes are worse or houseflies are worse one summer because a winter was milder. Then they get even worse the next year. It just depends on how the weather works.
Yeah. Well, and this, like his comment, because he mentioned like, oh, they live in the bell tower. So this is another important point that we kind of glossed over. It's like they do come to the same place year after year. Like they like to raise their babies in the same place year after year. So oftentimes they'll sort of travel between a place where they spend the winter and a place where they raise their babies. And so they're loyal to both their winter place and their summer baby raising place.
How many
oftentimes.
bugs we have? Yes.
Yeah, and like species that live in warmer areas like the tropics, they also will travel around, but they'll travel like the same routes oftentimes, chasing sort of like different fruiting patterns, like different species of, different like good patches of trees that have a certain kind of fruit they like, but like the fruits don't all ripen at the same time,
Right.
And so a lot of times people, when they put up a bat box, though, they'll be frustrated. It'll be like several years and they're like, there's still no bats. But then I always say, like, be patient. And once they start coming, they're going to keep coming.
Yeah. Once they discover what's going on.
Once they pop, the fun don't stop.
Yeah, TJ Gwynn said the video they were looking at, the person had rabies and they said they only had days to live. That's really sad.
Oh, that is really sad. Bummer.
Paul Daly, another good point. A bat has a hard time taking off. They need to drop into flight. This is also true for a lot of species. Yeah. So and actually I talked about this on a presentation I did a couple weeks ago, which a lot of times I'll get an email that's like someone's like, oh, I found this sick bat, and they're sending me a photo of it, and I'm like, oh, the bat's probably not sick, it probably just accidentally landed on the ground and there's nothing nearby for it to climb up. So if there is something nearby, like a tree or whatever, they'll climb up it and then they can drop down into flight. But if there's not anything nearby,
it makes sense, the reason why they like to hang out so high.
Yeah, exactly. And that's true. If you're putting up a bat box, it has to have an open area beneath it for them to drop out of it, right? Or maybe they can crawl out and crawl up the tree, but they prefer somewhere that they can like drop out and be on their way.
Yeah, they don't seem to be a species that likes to get a good running start first.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be difficult. Yeah, I think one of the things, so like some of the species that are a little bit, I guess I would say stronger flyers they can take off from the ground. Um, like this one can sometimes. And I was talking earlier about like their behavioral differences. I think it's so interesting because whenever I catch these red bats, this is just another picture of the red bat, they always spread out their wings like this. They're like, I like grab it and they're like, how dare you? And then they just stay like that. So I love taking pictures of them. But what they're doing is they're trying to make themselves look big and scary.
Do you have any dark brooding bats species that you're aware of?
Dark brooding, like they just like what, like they just sulk or pout or something.
Like they tend to chase criminals in the dark.
I don't know.
Like of the superhero variety.
I haven't.
That had their parents murdered in front of them when they were children.
I haven't encountered any bats like that, and if I had, I don't think I'd be at liberty to say.
Ah.
Have to
See
admit.
that?
Well done.
I have to say, I've waffled on this over the years, and I'm not a big Batman fan.
No.
I feel like he doesn't have superpowers. He just has a lot of money. And
So who is your?
He has
Who
a
is
lot of
your superhero?
gadgets, so he does have a lot of money. He is suave
Spider-Man.
with the ladies. There you go.
Yeah.
He's got he's like a brainy guy.
Yeah. Well, but I will say, like, someone else was like, they like him for that reason. Like, he is just an ordinary person who put forth a lot of effort and became a superhero. So,
and he does have really good detective skills, and he is a pretty smart guy to kind of outbrain some of these psycho people. So, I mean, he's not all just money. He does have a skill set. It's just not a super, like, Superman style skill set.
Yeah.
I think that kind of gives a different quality of superhero. You got to have a mix.
Yeah,
I think it makes him more relatable, more human.
I think that's probably true for many people. Yeah, I guess I just want to be swept away in like fantasy superhero world.
But I mean, he does have a bat cave, so that's cool.
Yeah.
So while I was thinking, or messing around earlier, I was thinking about, because I don't know if you know this or not, but Joe and I have a pop culture podcast that we do every 2 weeks, and so we nerd out on all sorts of movies, cartoons, comic books, anything that gets your geek on. That's what we do. And so I was thinking while I was researching this, I was like, I wonder how many movies or anything in pop culture that I can think of just off the top of my head that references bats. And so I came up with a list. I hope you're ready because it's fun.
I am totally ready. I'm so excited.
Okay, so of course the Batman series that started in the 60s derived from the comic books, of course. But then it rotated into all the different variations of the Batman movies, which everyone has their own favorite Batman. The 1989 Batman is my personal favorite, followed by Christian Bale's version. Everyone else has their own flavor of Batman. But beyond that, obviously there's the vampire bat, scary Dracula sightings of the 1930s, and then there's some renditions also in the 60s that I've seen. But there's also in children's cartoons, for example, like Fern Gully has Robin Williams' character is Batty, and he is he's a fruit bat that was experimented on, and so he has like this weird little electric shock thing sticking out of his head, and he's super fun character. Love him.
Yeah. Well, I love him, but I also feel a little bit sad when I watch that as an adult because I'm like, oh, what a horrible portrayal of scientists. Because he like escaped these like evil scientists that were just like, I don't know, fucking around with him, and he's all like brain damaged now because of it. I feel so sad.
Yes. And there's also another cartoon that's a little bit lesser known called Anastasia, a princess movie. And there is a albino. I believe he's also a fruit bat, if I recall. I can't. Bartok, I believe, is his name, and
Okay.
he is kind of like the comedy relief for the villain of that story. So that's another bat reference.
I remember.
While we're hanging out in the 90s, Ace Ventura Pet Detective, when he goes to Africa, that's his main, the indigenous tribe kind of holds a bat. It's an albino bat as well, as kind of like its sacred creature that they kind of like worship as like a deity of sorts. And
Okay.
so there's a reference to bats in that funny movie. And also one of my childhood favorites from 1984, The Neverending Story, has a giant bat that the night, or the is it a night bog, I think is what his name is. Anyways, it's very briefly in the movie, but this little goblin-like creature actually rides the bat, because the bat is like larger than a regular human. So
Oh, wow.
that is just a few bats that I pulled from my pop culture knowledge
Yeah.
to highlight. I'm sure there's plenty of other instances, but those were just some fun ones that popped in my head while I was thinking about it.
Yeah, no, that's I would not have guessed that there were so many. I never really sat down and thought about it all at once, though. It's kind of amazing. Another one that comes to mind is the Mouse Detective, like the Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, I don't
one.
I know which one you're talking about. I don't even remember.
There's
watching
like
it.
there's also like a bad guy bat in that.
Okay.
Like he's like the assistant bad guy. I forget if he's like humor relief for the bad guy or not. I forget. I think he's kind of scary actually.
Ooh.
But yeah.
Late night bat art.
We have a good comment here. It always takes me a minute to figure out how to present on screen. One little brown bat can easily catch 1,000 mosquito-sized insects in an hour, and a nursing mother eats approximately 4,500 insects every night. Yeah, this
That's a lot of bat.
Yeah, they can eat a lot of insects. I'll say that. These numbers are like hotly contested among bat biologists because I don't know, scientists love to critique each other's methods. They're like, this person is an idiot, and like
I don't know what they're talking about.
I know, yeah. One of the things with the like 1,000 bat number is that they're like, oh well, like they literally put a bat in a room with a bunch of mosquitoes, so they're like, oh, like we don't know, like the bat was like really really hungry because these like scientists,
did they starve it ahead of time?
Yeah, or like oh, like well there weren't any moths around, so it couldn't eat moths. But it's like we know that they eat mosquitoes. Like you can look in their poop of wild bats and find that there's mosquito parts and stuff. So like they can eat a bunch